If your child has ever woken up in the middle of the night screaming, but they're not awake and you can't wake them up, they might be having night terrors. It's not uncommon in young children, but it is scary. Alanna McGinn is here to help us decode them and share what we can do if this happens. Alanna, let's start by explaining what a night terror actually is.
So a night terror is categorized as a parasomnia. Parasomnia is our sleep disorders where the individual is sleeping and there's some kind of unusual physical event or some type of experience that disrupts their sleep. So an example of a parasomnia would be sleepwalking. It would be confusional arousal. It could be a night terror. Night terrors tend to be more common in children than adults. There was actually a study that was done that showed 40% of those kids studied experience at least one night terror. They tend to happen between the ages of 3 to 5 years of age. They're more common in boys than they are girls. And a child can have one night terror or they can have multiple throughout their childhood.
Okay, very interesting. And as a parent having gone through it and not knowing what it was, it is very scary. So what is happening when your child experiences a night terror?
Basically, what a night terror is, it's when the sleep side of your brain is fighting against the wakeful side of your brain. So it is an arousal disorder. It can be very scary for a parent to experience what it is. Basically, what happens is when your child wakes up from a night terror, they can wake up suddenly screaming, yelling. They actually look terrified. They look scared. Their arms could be thrashing, their legs can be thrashing. But what a parent will notice is when they're comforting their child, the child isn't fully aware that the parent's there. So they're not responding to the parent. There's no back and forth conversation. The child will then fall asleep and likely not even remember what happened in the morning.
Oh my gosh, been through it. And it's terrifying because you hope as a parent you can at least comfort them and they're not getting it. It's almost like they can't even see or feel or hear you. So how can parents help their child when this is happening?
You know, it's something that I tell a lot of the families that we work with. It is always scarier for the child to go through it or for the parent to witness the child going through it than the child going through it themselves. And something to kind of give them comfort. It's very common in that age group. It's something that they do eventually grow out of as they get older, as their nervous system develops, they do grow out of it. So it's not a cause for concern. What you should be doing if your child is experiencing night terrors, focus on their sleep health. Start focusing on their sleep hygiene, because when a child is sleep deprived or has that existing sleep debt, that can trigger that night terror. So focusing on, the quality, the quantity of sleep they're getting, age appropriate sleep patterns and bedtimes and things like that. We also want to focus on eliminating any job that a child feels they need to do in the middle of the night. And this is what I mean by that. When a child kind of has to force themselves to wake up to look for that missing soother, right? Or look for that parent lying beside them because that's how they fell asleep. So they want to kind of wake up and make sure mom or dad is still right there. That's when we get that fight. That's when that wake side of the brain's like, okay, I got to wake up and look for something. But the asleep side of the brain's like, no, I want to sleep. So we want to remove any kind of job that a child feels they need to do.
Okay, that is really interesting. Is there anything else that might be going on with the child that's experiencing a night terror, Alanna?
Also look for if there's any kind of major stresses going on in the child's life or any new transitions, something like potty training. I was working with a family who had started potty training and the child started exhibiting night terrors. So we put the potty training on hold, focused on the sleep health and the sleep hygiene, and then we'll slowly reintroduce the potty training again. So it could be potty training. It could be welcoming a new sibling into their home. It could be starting school, right? Daycare, preschool, kindergarten, all of those major transitions can trigger a night terror.
So if this is happening, should a parent wake their child up in the middle of a night terror?
So this is a common question that we get asked. My recommendation is try not to wake them up, because when they do wake up from that night terror, they might kind of jolt awake, and that could perhaps cause physical harm to the child, also to the parent, right? So the best thing you can do is create that safe environment for the child. So make sure that there's nothing they can knock over or hit you with by accident. Sleepwalking can be a cause, or it can happen throughout a night terror. So something like locking the windows, locking the front and back doors, perhaps even putting up a baby gate on the stairs so they can't fall down the stairs. So making sure there's as safe environment as possible. And then also, if you find that your child wakes up at a similar time every night having that night terror, try rousing them gently awake about 15 to 30 minutes before that night terror normally happens. Because this is what this is going to do is it'll break their cycle of sleep and allow them then to fall back asleep and then sleep through when they would normally have that night terror.
Ooh, that's good strategy right there. Okay, so now that we know what night terrors are, explain the difference between them and nightmares, please.
So night terrors and nightmares often get confused because the child does actually look terrified when they're having a night terror, but there's no scary thoughts going on in their mind when they're having that night terror. A great way to tell them apart is with nightmares. When you're comforting your child normally is awake. They are responding to you. There is that back and forth conversation. They're able to probably tell you what the nightmare was about. They'll fall asleep, and when they wake up in the morning, they'll be able to remember what happened and maybe even remember the dream. Also with nightmares tend to happen later in the night, whereas night terrors tend to happen earlier in the night. So about 2 to 3 hours after your child falls asleep.
Really good and so insightful, Alanna.